Welcome to this explainer. So today we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating. We're looking at a source text that proposes going backward, way backward, to find a completely new structural alternative for Iran's future. We're talking about taking a 6,000-year-old philosophical framework and using it as a modern-day solution for a country that's caught in profound turmoil. Let's get right into it. To wrap our heads around this huge paradigm shift, we're going to move through 6 key areas: the bipolar trap, the ancient cosmic blueprint, the gravity of the third way, the decentralized strike, the Quam-Vatican solution, and finally, a new civilizational unity.
Okay, part 1. The bipolar political trap.
The source kicks things off with a pretty stark premise. It argues that modern Iranian politics are stuck in a deeply flawed binary. On one hand, you've got standard Western political models, which the text describes as trapped in factional bickering, entirely reactive, and really just focused on replacing one elite group with another. On the other hand, the author pitches what they call a civilizational framework. This is a nonpartisan shield, rooted in deep historical continuity rather than just reactive politics. The core argument here is that purely reactive opposition lacks real depth, but the civilizational framework, it provides a profound, unshakable anchor for society.
Moving on to part 2, the ancient cosmic blueprint. So, looking past standard politics, we hit the absolute foundation of this idea: Humata, Hukta, Huvarashta. This is the ancient Iranian triad that translates to good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And according to our source, this isn't just some catchy ancient motto. It historically served as the actual foundational operating system for society. The text strongly argues that the current regime operates in total defiance of this 6,000-year-old indigenous identity, an identity famously known as Iran Shar.
Going deeper, the text explains that Ahura Mazda and the Amesha Spentas essentially form a 6,000-year-old blueprint for systemic equilibrium. And it's important to note, the author doesn't see this as just mystical abstraction. They argued this ancient wisdom was deliberately engineered. It was systematically designed to protect society from opportunists and doomsayers alike.
There's a really fascinating perspective presented here. The text describes these principles as the primordial comprehension of cosmic balance, energy preservation, and systemic equilibrium. And check out that parentheses, akin to the foundational laws of thermodynamics. Think about that for a second. It's framing cultural heritage not just as some history lesson, but as an eternal law of nature. The author is literally arguing that these ancient principles align directly with the fundamental laws of the universe.
Which brings us to part 3, the gravity of the third way.
You might be wondering, how exactly does an ancient cosmic order fix modern economic distress and political turmoil? Well, the author points to this quote: "Human beings do not live by bread alone. They require meaning, dignity, and historical continuity." This really anchors the whole philosophy. The idea is that if a movement is purely reactionary, if it's built only on hating a current regime, it's going to shatter when that regime falls because there's nothing left to build with. Unity, the source argues, just can't be forged merely through a shared enemy.
Instead, the source suggests rediscovering the fire of ancient Iran. This is supposed to act like a massive gravitational center, pulling a fractured, exhausted populace back to a common core. By existing entirely for its own sake, rooted in rich heritage, this third way creates a cultural gravity that's so incredibly strong, occupying dogmas and political bickering simply starve of oxygen. They just collapse under the weight of their own artificiality.
All right, part 4, the operational engine.
Moving from the cultural side to actual structural liberation, we have to ask a really tough question. How do everyday citizens bypass a modern surveillance state? Imagine trying to disable a resistance network that isn't connected by internet cables or centralized servers, but by neighborhood pantries and family trust. How do you even begin to stop that?
The answer provided here is decentralized resilience. This basically operates through a cellular culture of mutual aid. It quietly shares resources family by family, neighborhood by neighborhood. And because it's built on organic trust and a shared civilizational identity, it absolutely cannot be severed by a police state simply flipping a switch and cutting internet access. This kind of distributed resilience allows citizens to steadily accumulate resources completely outside the state's control, fundamentally winning a silent war of attrition.
90 million. That staggering number represents the population of citizens who, by building this alternative economic framework, generate the exact staying power needed to outlast an elite minority. It is, at its core, a massive game of numbers and endurance.
All of this culminates in what the text calls the economic lockout, a permanent cessation of compliance via self-reliant non-cooperation. Basically, when the tipping point is reached, the entire national workforce simultaneously chooses not to comply. An elite minority simply cannot survive when the workforce stops participating. It renders the ruling apparatus completely and utterly powerless.
Let's look at Part 5, the Vatican solution.
This brings us to the endgame. Historically, as we know, standard transitions of power in these scenarios often involve chaotic mob justice, bloody revenge, and a reactionary cycle of violence. But the framework here proposes what it calls the Vatican solution. Pitching a clean, humane, and definitive sovereign settlement, it offers a radically peaceful resolution, totally avoiding that descent into historical cycles of bloodshed.
Here's how the specific mechanics of that would actually work. The ruling forces would be permanently relocated to the city of Culm. Culm is then transformed into the Shia equivalent of Vatican City. These forces are completely stripped of weapons and state power, but, and this is a really vital distinction, they are granted personal freedom to live quietly. They're just barred from spreading fear, enforcing dogmas, or hijacking the nation. The author frames this as a brilliant, bloodless solution. It neutralizes the apparatus by granting them personal peace while permanently removing their coercive power.
And finally, Part 6, a new civilizational unity.
Now, to ensure this transition isn't just some temporary fix, the source maps out 3 vital steps for a cultural renaissance. Step 1. Educate the Iranian people on their pre-Islamic inheritance, not as a political slogan, but as a genuine structural science of living. Step 2. Re-educate the global media and international diplomats to look way past the superficial regime versus opposition binary. And Step 3. Establish a pluralistic, nonpartisan civilizational shield. This step-by-step paradigm shift essentially demands that everyone recognize this not as standard politics, but as a full-scale civilizational rescue mission.
Part of building that shield involves the concept of the Mehistan. The text defines this as the ancient Iranian institution and sovereign royal ideal that historically served to keep religious zealots and political demagogues in check. By reinstating concepts like the Mehistan, the source argues you create a supreme custodianship of the state, one that stands entirely outside of standard politics, big business, and sectarian religion. It's essentially a structural safeguard designed to outlive any single politician.
Ultimately, the text makes a really profound claim here. Anchoring the nation in this eternal cosmic order reclaims Iran as the cradle of human civilization. The core argument is that preserving culture for its own sake is the absolute only way to permanently free the nation from continuous cycles of destruction. It replaces a reactionary void with an eternal, unshakable foundation.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Can a 6,000-year-old cosmological blueprint truly dismantle a modern surveillance state? It's a deeply profound structural proposal we've explored today. It absolutely challenges how we view political change, conflict resolution, and cultural endurance, leaving us to wonder, does ancient cosmic equilibrium actually hold the ultimate key to modern liberation? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning everything.